So, hi everyone. My name is Gil Raviv. Thank you for being here. I'm honored to stand here in front of you because my gut feeling is that we share the same passion. Otherwise, you would probably not be here. And before we start, just a quick status check. How many of you are familiar with Power Query in Excel and Power Query Editor in Power BI? Who is brave enough to raise his hand if he doesn't know anything about Power Query? Anyone? Okay. It's going to be a nice ride for you, and welcome. You're going to love it. Perhaps you will not love anything that I will say, but at least the experience and the opportunity that you will have in this session, I'm sure that you will love that. So, again, Gil Raviv. I have a blog called datachange.com, so I even probably cannot pronounce it well. How many of you are familiar with my blog? Okay, nice. I thought that everyone will just come here only because they read my article, so yeah, we are in a good shape. So, just a very quick introduction about myself. I have 17 years of experience in software engineering, coming from Israel, developing all kinds of crazy cybersecurity solutions. You know, Israel, hacking, elections. We don't have hacking in elections, but we have hacking all the time. Or we are the ones that are doing the hacking. So I came from that life. And then in the last 2 years, between 2013 and 2015, I had the opportunity to join Microsoft Excel team. We were a bunch of very small, I hope that there is no Excel Microsoft official here. They will get my MVP award in 5 minutes. But just seriously, we had an amazing opportunity, a bunch of 50 software engineers in Israel to be honored to work on Excel 2016, while the other geniuses in Redmond were developing cross-platform. Android, iPhone, iPad, all the Office had to be rewritten to support those devices, and we, a bunch of 50 people, I will say crazy people, had the opportunity to get into a source code that was created over 30 years and develop new features in 2016. You may had the opportunity to visit one of those sessions as well in Excel, what's new in Excel. Specifically, I got to be the lucky program manager that owned the integration of Power Query in Excel 2016. Okay, so that's how I started working in business intelligence and BI. I didn't know that I am a BI person before that opportunity. And then I got really fell in love with Power Query and decided to switch my career from developing amazing and interesting things in development in the Israeli industry with startups and all kinds of crazy things that we can develop, and to move to be able to work with any person worldwide that is using Excel and working with data, and to be able to perform this self-service ETL as part of this Imagine solution. And it's so fun. You know, it's so fun to do it. So perhaps it's only me. For me, it was an amazing journey just to learn how to use the user interface and then to learn the M language to be able to work with those tools. In the last year and a half, I work from Chicago. I'm a group manager in Avanade. In Avanade, we are a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture, working on big projects in analytics. And I help to promote Power BI in new projects because Power BI is really hot. So it's full-time work, delivering self-service experiences to big organizations and be able to innovate with this amazing Power BI tool, like in a startup nation, ideology instead of mind, rapid prototyping, working on new insights in a way that wasn't possible in the past for centralized BI teams. So you're also welcome tomorrow to join my session about how to become a data innovation catalyst in your organization using those tools. Okay, so let's start. So today's session, we are going to discuss about self-service ETL experiences and scenarios where you need, when you transition from creating your own reports to reports that should be automated perhaps with a scheduled refresh on Power BI service, or when you work with other teams and their SQL Server perhaps is ever changing, or you are using probably 80% of any even big enterprise that I worked with, they have like 90% of their data sources are Excel files, even if those Excel files are used in a very production relevant environment. So to switch from working on a report for an ad hoc basis to a report that will refresh and will support the correct decision making is where you can be aware of some areas where Power BI by default is dangerous for you. And that's why I call it the 10 pitfalls of the data wranglers. You can mesh up and clean up data and prepare data and do magic with Power Query in Power BI. And I assume that most of you are doing that today. But there are very basic things that stops you from scaling up your solution. And today we will show you how to scale up those solutions. Okay, any questions before we start? Okay, so how many of you know the query editor in Power BI? How many of you use the query editor and saw on the main canvas data which wasn't the full data set that you loaded? It was only a preview. Do we have people in the room that loaded more than like 100 rows? Or? Okay, so you probably know that the technology around Power Query allowed us to create an amazing experience which allows us to get a preview of the data, create the transformations, streamline the automation of those transformations, and then load them into the report, right? So we are working on a preview of the data. If the data is big, by the way, it's like even 1,000 rows, and you are not really being able to create the queries based on the actual data. It's only a preview of the data. So the data is limited, right? Which is a good thing, because now we can say we work with big data, right? We work with big data. So preview is great, but we have what I call the preview bias, okay? What do you see in this picture? That's like an equivalent for what we can see in the data through the preview of the query editor. A smiley face, right? With lots of opportunities and dollars on the small circles, right? But it's not a smiley face. It was a fish. And there was much more opportunities there, okay? If you missed that, I can do it again. This is, by the way, the first time that I'm using this device, so I can do that all the time for you. Okay, so we have a fish. And fish, this is a golden fish. Lots of money, and we missed it because we were biased by what we saw in the query editor through the preview. So that's the first element where you will see in the demos that we will start today, we will walk through today, that the preview is creating for you an experience with an easy clicks in the user interface, which are based on the preview. So if the actual data is not a smiley face but a fish, the instructions that are created underlined in the engine may fail. So that's the first challenge that we have with Power BI as a data wrangler. Okay? The next one is the fact that data is changing all the time. So the same formulas that were created by the engine when we click the user interface, that were perhaps even perfect for the data set that we used. Now imagine you import data from a folder, and the Excel files now are a bit different, because there was another person in another team that decided that he needs to change the column names, right? Yeah, it makes sense. I'm the owner of the Excel file. Well, who are you to tell me to keep the column names as they are? You cannot. So the fact that you perform amazing transformations in the query editor, but then the data is changing, will create failures. And those failures sometimes can happen in production when the data is refreshed automatically, perhaps through the enterprise gateway or the personal gateway, or no matter how you deal with it, or perhaps with a Power BI desktop file that you send to others and they're using it as a template, because you can also use Power BI desktop as a template. So those elements can fail. And even though Power BI and the query editor allows you to quickly fix those elements, sometimes you are not there to fix them. And it would be, I think, quite better to just be able to create robust queries that will allow you not to fail in those 10 pitfalls. Okay? So before we start, let's switch to my computer. Okay. So, sorry for the fact that you don't see that. It wasn't, somehow it wasn't in the deck. So we are going to show you now around 7 different scenarios where we have 2 personas in our domain. One, we call it Alice, and that's Alice from Wonderland, but it's mainly from Alice and Bob from computer science and encryption. We just need 2 personas that communicate with each other. So we have Alice. We are Alice. We are delivering Power BI reports. You see that's bird, sorry, flamingo, or whatever the name of that pink creature. That's our Power BI reports. And we are owning this report. Now, since we work both on enterprise corporate level scenarios and reporting scenarios where we work with all kinds of DBAs, but we also work with self-service scenarios, and we have some Excel files that we need to import. We have colleagues that, for this case, this is the med ether, but let's call it DBA Bob, okay? So DBA Bob, when he's a friend of us and we go to lunch together, he will update us whenever he changes the column names, right? But what happens when somehow, in this specific scenario, we are not going to lunch with DBA Bob? Okay? When we don't go to lunch with DBA Bob, he can do whatever he wants with the data source. He doesn't even know that he should update us, because the production level reporting solution that we delivered last year and got a great promotion, and now all the C-level executives in our organization love our reports, he doesn't know that he can do some change there and suddenly it will fail, right? So establishing a data contract is an important thing, and perhaps also going to lunch with Bob is an important thing. But sometimes you don't have that data contract, and I will not spend 1 hour just discussing about, here is a great form for a data contract. These are the elements that you can fill to ensure that everything will work for you, because we live in real life, and in real life we don't have these scenarios. So without any further ado, let's open Power BI Desktop and start to do some exercises. Okay. By the way, that will be an interesting thing. So let's start by opening a specific file. So I open the Power BI Desktop. We'll go to Home, Get Data, and I will select Excel here. And let's take this file, which I call Pitfall number 2. Okay, so I have a single sheet in that report. Let's edit it in the query editor. Okay. So now, basically, for all of you who are new in Power BI and Query Editor, the experience that you will get is that you will see the preview in this report, this element here, and you will see some 4 steps. You remember we just did a single click to load the Excel worksheet, and you see we have 4 steps here. So in my mind, the first the first pitfall that everyone is doing in Power BI, at least everyone who are not familiar with Power Query and its huge opportunities in terms of the formula language, M. And by the way, you don't need to know M when you go out of this session. And the main idea is to show all of you why you should be able to work your way with M without knowing it, which is a great thing, you know, to do things without knowing. I think you are in a great spot. So I will go to the View tab, and you can see that we have here the formula bar. By default, it is disabled. When I will click here, suddenly, for those of you who didn't, how many of you are not familiar with the formula bar? You can be brave. Okay. So many! So that's actually the main pitfall that we are now sharing with you. So there aren't a lot of people in the room that weren't familiar with that part, but you would be surprised by the things that you miss if you don't have that formula bar open, okay? Just as a very quick notion, so yes, of course, you can also click here on Advanced Editor, and you can see the entire formula, the entire expression that we created through the user experience. And we are not going today, I think we are not going today to touch this screen at all. And each one of the steps that you did in the UI usually translates into a single line in that previous code. And you can also see that specific line here on the formula bar. And of course, if you click on the applied steps of the transformation, you can find each one of those transformations here in the formula bar. So now, once we introduce the first pitfall, which is to being just ignorant and, you know, fall, right? When you don't have the site, you just fall. Now, with the formula bar open, you can start avoiding those specific pitfalls. So let's move to the second pitfall. The second pitfall was very, very, very annoying. Remember, we just imported an Excel file. Now, let me show you the original Excel file that we imported. So that was pitfall number 2, column types before. If you can see, let me try to zoom it up. So I have some crucial information for my organization. Me as Alice, I create amazing reports from this Excel file. And Bob, somehow, 2-3 years ago, he had some 3 columns with some names that I don't even know what their meaning are in the data. And I just skip. I don't need these columns to my business needs. So when I see this data, for me, it's translated in my mind to unimportant column 1, unimportant column 2, and unimportant column 3. Okay? I don't need it as Alice. Now, Bob, most likely, there is a good chance that he doesn't need it as well, right? Because perhaps it's not needed anymore in the organization. So one time, when I will let's just move back. When I will go back to the Power BI file, okay, and now let's do something very interesting. So now, Bob realizes that he doesn't need those, so he's going to tell his boss how smart he is. He just deleted all those unnecessary columns because now he wants to be really important in terms of the messaging of adding business value with his own reporting and self-service Excel files. So now you will not find any column which is not needed anymore. By the way, it's also great for file size, right? The data, the workbook is now smaller in terms of its size. So I save this file, and now I go again to this report, and I'll refresh it. It didn't work. Does it make sense to you that it doesn't work? How many of you got this experience? Okay. So Microsoft who designed an amazing product for all of us, thought of the basic scenarios. The basic scenarios, and let's see that basic scenario. The basic scenario was to import an Excel file, okay? And in the third step, all the column names were promoted. And in the fourth state, since we are going to work with visuals that require some mathematical manipulations, they converted dates to date and numbers to numbers, right? They did it automatically for us. Because if they wouldn't do that, when we will just import everything, by the way, most of the users even don't go to the query editor. They don't know that it exists. So when it's imported as a visual, they just get failures. If they will just drag a textual column or even a column that wasn't identified, you see in this step, you can see all the icons here. All the icons as the ABC 1 to 3, ABC 1 to 3. This is the any type. So Power Query in this case doesn't really care about the type. So when it will get translated into the report, it will be like a text file. And when you assign that column to a value in the visual, it will fail with an error. And it will ask you to convert it into a number. So Microsoft decided it's crucial to resolve this experience by automatically detecting the types. And that's the fourth step here. We are just detecting the types. Now, when we detect those types, you can see that the code that was translated in the user interface explicitly asked for the specific column names. And we don't want that, right? Because now when unimportant columns are deleted and we don't have any data contact with Bob, we are in a big problem. So what is the solution? The solution is quite fun. That's the solution. That's it. I don't need the types. Since all of you are experts, you can now go explicitly to those specific columns. For example, here we have dates. So now I can change it into a date. And I have in visitors the amount. I can change it to whole number. Now I have change types, but only on the columns that I need. Now, in Murphy laws, usually perhaps those columns will fail, but in normal life, the columns that you need are most likely the ones that will remain in the external data source. So that's a great way to avoid the second pitfall, which is the automatic detection. By the way, let's say if you have a column and you are now doing a split, let's just split this column. Okay, by space, it just doesn't matter. You see what happened here in this area? Let me show it to you. Just a second. So I have another split column because you see, that was the split column. And the last step was, again, another change type. So again, I created a kind of an experience which perhaps I didn't ask for that. Again, that was designed by Microsoft to make sure that the types are correctly identified automatically to save the basic users the need to understand that there are types. But for you, as an expert, you don't really need this automation. Now, unfortunately, there is no way to go here somewhere in File Options and to automatically disable the type detection from global, from any future report that you are working on. The only thing that you can do is to go to data load, and here inside data load, let me show it to you. You have the automatic detect column times that you can disable, but you will only disable it for this report. So again, it's a bit difficult, and for me, the only way to get around this experience is to have the formula bar, and each step that I create to look what the formula bar reveals to me, okay? And then make it a manual effort instead of an automatic one. Any questions? Okay. let's move to the third pitfall. Now, the third pitfall is a bit different than all the others. And let's open another Excel file. Okay. It's this one. So again, we will show you a very dummy story, just to make it a bit more interesting. So we have a company, and this company every year, on an annually basis, gets all the low performers and kick them out of the company. Okay? Sounds familiar? Okay. Sorry for those of you who, but probably you are Power Query users. You are not 5, you are 6. So we just have, let's show you the raw data that we have here. It's just a lot of employee IDs with their performance rank between 1 to 5, and some decision, like one should get an email with a template that will say you're fired, and all the others will not get that email, okay? Just a very simplistic example. And you can see also here in the Excel file, we have a distribution of the different users, the different employees. So you can see that we have a very good range of good performers, and only a very small one needs to go out. This is the you are fired, the one that you see here. Okay? Only this small bar, low bar, are those employees that should get fired. Now, unfortunately, this year, we have a lot of amazing Power BI junior developers that work with the HR department, and they help them to make the decisions. And this year, because of some real challenges, the competitor released Power BI, perhaps? No, just kidding. Now we need to get out, to lay out all those employees that are also in rank number 2. So we need to get out number 1 and number 2, okay? So now let's go through the flow of the junior Power BI developer that will work on the decision-making report. Okay. Are you ready? No, you're not. Okay, so let's open another, let's just see, we'll close this one. Do we have anything here? Yeah, we can remove this one. So let's start a new report. If you remember, I can also, through the query editor, import new data sources as well. And we'll take the Excel file, and we'll take pitfall number 3 sample. And we have here some table with addresses, so all the people that should get fired, we will send them emails, and we have here the employee performance. This is the report that we need. So let's load this one. Okay. So we now have this report, and remember, usually every year we go, and let me do it for the junior developer with pitfall number 1 unaware. So let's also hide the formula bar. So now each year, the junior developer just go to the performance rank and check out number 1, right? And these are the people, the employees that we need to keep in the organization. It makes sense, right? Okay, now let's check the formula bar. What do you think the formula bar will show? Any ideas? Sorry? Yeah. Let's see. And let's also try to navigate the zoom. Okay, you see? We have, and please you don't need to waste time on it. If you don't really need to know M, though M can change your life. If you want to move from a super data Wrangler, ETL ninja to Wonder Woman, then no, perhaps it wasn't any. I didn't suggest anything that was inappropriate. No, it could be funny. I have a costume, but so you see the condition makes sense. We just filter out. We select all the rows that are different than one, right? It's great. But if we will go now and let's do the same, and again, I'm going to hide the formula bar, and let's do the same. This time, 1 and 2. Okay, because this here, we are going to lay off all those that got rank number 2. Right? Unfortunately, but that's the thing, and I'm the junior Power BI developer that work with HR to get all the process done. So I'm clicking now OK. Okay. And we are in a good shape now. Yeah, I can now load the report and start sending the emails to the unfortunate employees. Now, look what happened in the formula bar. Any ideas what are the implications? Yeah, we are firing the top performers. Who is 4? That's a great opportunity for number 4s. Okay, so that's pitfall number 3 with a combination of unusing the formula bar. You are in bad shape. Okay? Now, just to share with you the logic, what happened here, because like when I saw it for the first time, actually I didn't get to lay off anyone, but I had this experience before. Luckily for me, I was able to recognize the problem before I published any report, but I didn't identify it immediately. And then when I was more proficient with them, I started to immediately identify it, but it was always like each time I'm clicking on the filter, I'm feeling insecure and I need to check the formula bar. No, it's a bad experience, right? So let me just show you very quickly what's the common sense around it. So basically, the common sense around it, and let's just move to a casual M to do that. Just a second. So let's just create a new query here from a blank query. And just to show you, so this is the syntax, for example, to create a list between 1 to 10. Okay? So it's a curly bracket, 1, 2 dots, and then 10. And now I can use the user interface to change it into a table. So now when I have this column and I want to do the filtering, you can see that when I will unselect 1, it will work fine. Okay? When I will unselect 1, 2, 3, 4, it will also work fine. You see? I have not equal 1. Let me also show it to you. Not equal 1, not equal 2, not equal 3, not equal 4. That's what we wanted. Now, and that's where the things are different. When your selection and unselection are equal in numbers, then suddenly the logic selects instead of unselecting. So for you, the only risk and the need to be a bit nervous is only when you see that you have the same proportions. Only then you don't count all the selections, but that's when you should see that you get ORs. Usually you would better have the not equal than the equal sign. Okay, so you don't need to know M, you just need to know that equal is equal and not equal is the greater, lower than combined. So the pitfall, you are asked, so again, the team in Microsoft knows this experience. It's probably a matter of priority, okay? And I'm sure that you will have smart people that will show you some other scenarios where when you don't need to lay out anyone, that it makes sense to keep it as it is, but now, another very dangerous experience here in this specific element. Let me just select everything here. So where you'll get into this pitfall sometimes you have a wide range of values on the filter, so the chance that you will really select, the number of selected and unselected will be the same is not very high. However, look what happens now when I click 1. I'm using the search capability to find what I would like to exclude. So in this case, I want to exclude 10. So I typed 1, and now I just want to exclude 10. And when I will do that, then you will see that you have equal 1. So that's where you will probably fall into that pitfall, that you are doing a search, and then the numbers of optional values are reduced, and then if the number of unselected and selected is the same, you are in trouble. Okay, any questions? Okay, so that was a unique pitfall that creates situations where your decision-making can be completely offset because you just missed the logic of the filtering. And now we are moving back to all those terrible things that Bob are doing for us because we don't go to lunch with him. So again, it's all about column names, different names for columns, or columns which will be missing. Okay, let's start the fourth pitfall. Okay, so we have here pitfall number 4, reordering. How many of you had the urge to reorder your columns in the query editor? Okay. You are a very brave people. So you see here I have an example. I have some data that I want to import as it is. Let's even do it from scratch here very fast. So I'll open the Power BI desktop. And while it loads, I can sing songs. No, I cannot. And now let's open get data, and we'll take Excel, and we'll just load pitfall number 4. Okay, we open the Excel. You see that I have a worksheet with all kinds of columns. Let's click Edit. I think it's even a different example. So let's say in our case, you see we have visitors here, and we have lots of unimportant columns. Now let's say that we don't trust Bob, right? Last month, he just removed those unimportant columns, and we told him that it will take us time to change the queries. Please get back those columns. So he returned them. And now we have a new column, which is crucial to the organization, and that's the column that you see here, the visitors. So what you would normally do, right? You'll just do something like that. Okay? We just did a reordering, right? Now, just as a side note, you don't need to do that because when you load everything to Power BI, at least when I last published that specific scenario, the orders of the fields are alphabetical. So reordering is mainly good for debugging purposes. It's not really important debugging purposes, or perhaps if you need to do a lot of unpivots or select few columns and the others to keep, and you don't have to go all over the place to select those columns. So you first do some reordering, and then you do all the other selection. So these areas are good for you to do the report authoring, but then in the refresh it will fail. Why it will fail? Again, the same experience. Let's just zoom it. Okay, you see? I have here a function that performs reorder. And again, you don't need to understand the syntax, but you see reorder columns, so you probably can guess what it does. And you see the entire data set of our columns are mentioned in the query. Okay? So what would be the best thing to do? Don't do reorder. Okay? It's easy, right? The pitfall was... So that's my recommendation. Just don't do the reordering. However, if you really insist of doing them, and we will not go over the solution quickly because I want to show you the other demos. But so just as an example, if you will open the zip file at home or later tonight, probably not, pitfall number 4, you will see in the edit queries all kinds of examples of good and bad ways to do that. But basically, I also created for you, for those of you who think that they want to transcend into M programming, I created for you here a function. Okay, just a second. This specific function receives a table and receives the columns. You have 100 columns, and you only want 3 columns to reorder. So you can select, you can state in this function the names of those columns and the indexes, the indices where on the table you want to put them, what is their new location. And that specific function performs everything for you. We will go over some of the things that you see here, so it's not really important for now to go over that because then we'll just miss more pitfalls. But this is an example how you can get people that know M very good and incorporate their work without even knowing M. Because for you, the way that you can incorporate this specific function is just by, and let's show it to you in a second. So I have here a reorder good query that, as you can see here, I'm just calling my function. I type the function with the source, and here I stated that I want to move the region manager and the head count to be on column, actually on the second column, because indexes are started in 0 in Power Query. Okay, so again, if you will see when I will go, let's just remove this one and show you how it started. So it started with source. We had source, and we just wanted to move these 2 columns to like that. That was the operation that we wanted to do. It was for some reason important for us, though I don't understand why you would insist to do that. But if you do, which is fine, probably there are some more advanced scenarios where you have additional advanced queries that are referencing this query and rely on the location of the columns, then it makes a lot of sense to do those operations. But you will be able just to do now. So now, instead of this reordering, I can delete this step and instead click here on the FX. And now I can select the specific source and now just write region manager with quotes. Let's do that very quickly. And the head count. And we want the offset to be number 1. Let's see if it will work. Didn't work. So let's remind ourselves. Yeah. We are missing, just a second, sorry. Blue screen. I have it here. No, I didn't have it here. So let's go back, open the advanced editor, and we'll see there's a number, a list, and a table. And let's see why it doesn't work for us. Source name. Sorry. Let's see. Source, head count. Okay, so we moved the region manager and head count from position number 2, which is index number 1 in Power Query, and it worked for us. So Again, that was a relatively easy situation. There was an reordering. Usually, all of us are doing reordering. If you don't really need it and you just need it for troubleshooting, do it, but then delete that step. That's the easiest thing. All those sophistication things that I shared with you is really for like very rare 1% scenarios. Okay, let's move to the fifth pitfall. And this one is going to be relatively easy. So we have an Excel file. Let's open it. Remember the unimportant columns that we had? So now, let's imagine that we just want to import those. So let's just close those Excel files. And we'll take, now in our scenario, and this is probably should be pitfall number 1. How many times you deleted columns in Query Editor because you don't need those columns in your report? Don't do that. No, I'm just kidding. You should delete columns as much as needed because the data model will be smaller and everything will be efficient for you. By the way, if you are not sure about some columns, you can load them and hide them in the report. So all the analysts that work with Power BI for the visualization aspects don't need to see hundreds of different unimportant column 1, unimportant column 2, unimportant column 3. Hide those columns. That's something which will make things easier. So let's show you very quickly what is important in terms of column selection. So you can see in this case, I started here. Actually, that was, do you see the, let's try to zoom a bit. So we just have the same Excel file with the 3 unimportant columns, okay, that we imported. And now, usually what you would want to do, you will select those 3 unimportant columns and you'll delete them, right? But the mistake is that there is a good chance that those specific columns will be removed also from the data source or will get changed. So when you see the specific step that we had here, you can see, I hope that you can see because I'm a bit tired on zooming in, at least in easier scenarios, you can see that in this code, there is a specific explicit reference to the unimportant columns. So whenever you click delete on columns, explicitly the Power Query engine wants to delete those columns from the data that is being loaded. Now, if the columns will also be deleted from the external data sources, and there is a good chance because if you decided to delete them, perhaps Bob will delete them as well, then the refresh will fail for you. What you should do instead? Anyone? Yeah, so remove other columns and select columns are working on the same way. It's actually the same code. So instead, we can just go to, let's just delete those steps. And now, instead of deleting those, okay, we can now either select those like that manually and click remove other columns. Okay, the code will be the same, but perhaps easier because we only have 3 columns to delete and 1,000 columns to keep. Okay, in this case, it was only 4 or 5. So instead, I will go to Home tab, choose columns, and I can just do uncheck here. Okay, and click OK. By the way, I didn't check the filter logic, how it works. But in this case, it will not. You will not suddenly keep columns instead of deleting columns instead of keeping them. So choose column explicitly require the code. When I click OK here, you see that the code is not deleting, the code is selecting. And now I have all the columns that I need. Okay? So it's a very basic way to approach, instead of removing columns, select columns. Now, sometimes you may have some specific business case where it's the opposite, and perhaps there are some scenarios and you will do that, but at least act in the awareness that any act on columns are translated into code, and usually column names and column types are changing all the time. So be aware of that. Now we have 4 minutes left, so let's move to the next one. So that was pitfall number 5. Very quickly, let's move to pitfall number 6. Pitfall number 6, to some extent, is the same. Instead of removing columns or keeping them, we just want to rename them, right? Because Bob gave a very bad names to his columns in the Excel file or even in DBA, and we just want better names. Now, if we will start changing unimportant column 1 to, I'm not sure if it's an important column, but let's call it unimportant column 1-2, then when Bob will rename the column or will remove that, the refresh will fail. So instead of doing this type of operations, if you will open the pitfall number 6 file that I shared with you and click Edit Queries to review what you have here, you will see when we just did the rename, the code here, again, just a second, creates for you rename columns, and then you see the hard-coded names are inside with pairs. Old name, new name, one list. Another old name, new name, second list. You have a nested list of lists with pairs of before and after. Now, this is more tricky because now, how would you change that to something that will work for you? So, the best way to approach this scenario is by using a function that let's just show it to you. So I'm just creating a function. Just a second. Let's just, it doesn't matter. I'm just click the FX to create a new step, and just to show you what is the most useful function that we use here. And this is table.column names. Okay, so when I use that function, table.column names, with the table that I had from the last step, now you can see that I have a list of headers. So from now on, any columns that you want to approach and perform some operation, and perhaps you have a better knowledge, a better data contract with Bob based on the location of the column instead of the column name itself. For example, you know that Bob may rename column number 1. So if you want to approach column number 1 to rename it, you can use with the curly bracket with 0. And now we have the first column, the old one that we can use. So now, when we move to the good solution, okay, you can see, just a second, okay? So here in this example, now you can see that I'm using the old names, which are likely to be changed also by Bob DBA. We are going to address the names by their location. So I'm using column name, and column name in this case, as you can see here, it was just a previous step that I added. Just a second. The previous step here is just table column names, promoted header, which was the previous table. So I just have another step in between to extract the column names, and I'm using that information instead. We have 1 minute before the Q&A, so let me just briefly show you what else you have in the zip file, okay? Because the main ideas are repeating themselves. So we also have an experience that allows you to perform extract. Just as an example, to explain. So usually when you import a folder with Excel files into Power Query, and there is a new combined binaries experience that allows you to get a folder of Excel files, define it very well, and import that into your solution. Basically, imagine a scenario. Let me show it to you. So here we have a CSV file where in the fifth step, I see it's only, we need to finish. So in the fifth step, you can see that instead of extracting only the columns in the table, I can extract also, so if you have 5 different files with different column names and you want to have a union of all those names to extract everything, you need to apply a code that will do that based on creating a union of all the column names from all the files inside the report. So I just see that I'm out of time. So we have 1 minute. Actually, there was an orange color that I missed. So we have 1 minute here. You can see more information. And by the way, if you will go into my blog and search for Pitfalls, you will get everything step by step. So you can go over all those specific elements, including all the M code. So if you want to move forward to M, you can use lots of useful functions there to create robust queries in this scenario. Okay? So I suggest, since we have only 1 minute, I can wait outside. If you have any specific question that you want to ask, feel free to ask me. I just lost myself in time. Okay, sorry. Thanks.